Hi, I'm Benton Stokes.
And I'm Elaine O'Rourke.
And this is Cocktail Theology. Hey there, how are you?
I'm well. We're kind of a house divided against ourselves right now. But I think we can still stand.
I think so. I think we're doing okay.
Should I explain why I said that? We've got two different cocktails.
We do.
And we made our own.
We did.
That's not usual for us.
Well, it's not.
Well, what are you drinking?
I am drinking a Kentucky Mule, which is bourbon, lime, and ginger beer.
Very good. I'm having a perfect martini, and that's not a description, it's a name. It's a perfect martini, and I'm using Nole gin. And the perfect martini is half sweet vermouth, half dry vermouth.
Ah, that's sort of like a perfect Manhattan.
Yes, it is. It is. I think there's another name for this thing, but it's perfect. It's just, that's the easiest word.
That works for me.
So do you know that song, If You're Happy and You Know It, Clap Your Hands?
I do, yes.
What do you think of that? As a songwriter and a worship leader, what do you think of that song?
I think it's fine for little kids, like, little kids. It's one of a multitude of happy clappy songs I sang as a child, and probably sang longer than that, even probably into my youth.
Well, see, here's what I'm wondering is why there are all those happy clappy songs that people sing way beyond their childhood. Now, that's not bad, right? I sing children's songs all the time in my head. Which may mean that's a problem for me, but that's not a problem for the church.
Right.
But why is happy clappy just such a big deal? Why is it you can go into any number of thousands of churches and there will be no recognition except during the sermon that there could be anything wrong in your life? And then when there is something wrong in your life, it's because you've sinned. I mean, help me with the happy clappy thing.
Yeah. A lot of the happy clappy stuff, this is a silly phrase, but I've heard it from years ago. You go to church to get your praise on or to get your Jesus fix. And that's just a really silly, but also just sort of super self-serving way to think about church. Like you're rolling into church having had a rough week, or not even a rough week. Maybe you just want to be pumped up and lifted up and whatever. And so church is there to do that for you. I don't really think that that's what church and what worship is supposed to be. Definitely isn't what it could be.
Okay.
But I know that you're right, because I have attended evangelical churches, and they do not a lot of traditional music, but they do a lot of just sort of modern, but I mean, modern is even a stretch sometimes. I mean, because some of these songs are not modern, but they do it like with a band sometimes, or they do it, to sort of get the energy level up in the room. And so people are clapping, they're raising their hands, and they're doing their thing, and even like the slower moments. Generally, it's not really about self-examination. It's really like about, I used to be this and now I'm this. Praise God.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean?
I used to be this and now I'm this. Praise God. Okay. All right. I can see that.
Yeah. But I think a lot of this comes from the fact that evangelical churches, by and large, don't pay any attention to the liturgical calendar. In the liturgical calendar, as we've talked about on this podcast many times, there are ebbs and flows. There are ups and there are downs. There are times of lament. There are times of self-examination. There are seasons where we spend weeks really examining our hearts and our lives and our behaviors and looking, actively seeking ways to live more like Jesus. If you're living according to the calendar, or at least spending time at church according to the calendar, then you're going to have those seasons where it's not going to be happy clappy.
Yeah.
Where it's actually going to be more like, where are you, God? Or, be with me in my sorrows, God. Or
Jesus had sorrows, God.
Yes. So if you're not paying attention to the calendar, then really you can just create, a really happy, upbeat, uplifting, whatever environment for people to gather in every week.
Yeah. As a preacher, I admit that I do appreciate when the worship time, and I'm including prayer and music and whatever happens before I go on. Mm-hmm. I do appreciate it when it's kind of a warm-up, like a warm-up act. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'm just being really honest here. If you are leading worship, and by the time that people have finished that period of time, they're ready to hear something, that's great for me. And so I really get the idea from a show kind of way of thinking, and I don't mean that derogatorily, actually, but from that perspective, why, as a preacher, you would want and usually a worship team, to just start ramping up.
Yeah.
Right? Ramp up, go a little low, and then really hit the ramp, right? Mm-hmm. So that when you come on, people are just like, they're good, they're ready to go,
yep.
Whatever. But as a worshiper, when I'm feeling really broken, there are times when happy songs are great. Mm-hmm. But there are times when I just want to be there and cry and have that be a normal thing you do in church.
Right.
In my most distant from God or most distant from church periods of time, it was not because of anything other than the fact that I couldn't deal with all of the people, the stuff and the hypocrisy, normal human hypocrisy, and just all of that. Mm-hmm. And if I'd been in one of those churches that was always, and now you should be cheerful, and now you should be cheerful, and now you should be cheerful. Oh, you're going to hell, and now you should be cheerful. I'm not sure I'd still be here.
Right.
Honestly.
Right. And that's part of the problem with this, is when that is the expectation, mm-hmm. that you're going to come in, you're going to get your praise on, and everybody's going to be happy, and you're not.
Right.
And you're sort of over at the end of the pew, sort of like, you look like you're sulking, or you look like you're not into it, or you look like, oh, who is she mad at? I mean, seriously, it doesn't give anybody any room to be anything but jubilant.
Yeah.
And so if you want to fit into that, then you either have to really be jubilant, or you have to fake it a lot.
Yeah. It reminds me of the energy of a revival.
Yes, and it is kind of like the energy of revival.
But every single week.
Yeah, every week.
That's a lot of revival.
It's a lot of revival. It is. And also, I think, being on the other side of that, it's a lot to drum that up every week. It's a lot, especially when, somebody on your team is going through something really hard, or you're going through something really hard. Right. Or I know there have been Sundays, when I was a full-time worship leader, when I would show up to lead worship and I didn't have it.
Yeah.
And I was just heavy, and I was sad, and I was depressed, and all this was going on. And it would have been really hard for me to go out there and say, yay, God, let's do it. Let's get our praise on. Yeah. And that's just, it's not realistic to expect that anybody can do that every week.
Do you think that and now I'm going to ask you to speak on behalf of 5 billion people or so, but do you think that for people who are seeking God, whatever that means, mm-hmm. that permanent revival is what they're looking for? I don't mean that they don't want to do it frequently, because there's something wonderful. It's like being at a rock concert, right? Your energy just soars, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I can't imagine if, maybe I'm just weird, okay? I'm just willing to admit that. But if I were in the congregation and I were seeking God, and I found out that you were really, really hurting and depressed, and you were leading me through, if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. Mm-hmm. That would really make me question everybody around me. Understandably, yeah. Mm-hmm. So what you're really having to do is put your show face on, right? That's exactly what you're doing. You're performing. And I'm not saying that there isn't some element of performance involved when you're leading worship, but you're really performing. Like you're an actor on a stage being something you're not. Yeah, and then to your question, is that what a seeking person wants or needs? I just don't think it's sustainable. I mean, I think in the short run it can be like, oh wow, this is what it's like, mm-hmm. to be a Christian, but more than that, like, high on the Spirit. Yes. This is what it's like to just sort of soak in that. This is really great.
But it is unsustainable because you are going to come to church after just having a fight with your spouse, or after just finding out that, one of your parents is very sick, or, you're going to come to church having to deal with something hard, and that's not going to cut it.
Right.
And you're going to realize that you have to kind of do that and be in that space and be that person while you're there, or else people are going to look sideways at you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like being an introvert at a family Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah.
You're not playing along. Yeah.
Right.
As we're talking about this, I'm thinking about our course, The Wall, which is about, for those of you who haven't taken it, it's about the steps of the spiritual journey. And this is more about, it's almost a sociology class, honestly.
It is.
It's more about how human beings go through their spiritual journeys and why we get stuck at certain points, right?
Yeah.
But I'm thinking about, that phase when you first discover something and you find your people, you find your tribe, and it could be anything, right? It could be the restaurant that you've discovered that you bring all your friends to, but you don't tell your non-friends about it, right? What I mean?
Right.
And the high that comes from that.
Yeah.
And then what happens is in the spiritual journey, that eventually crashes because real life kicks in. And if it doesn't crash, then that means you wind up being spiritually and emotionally stunted.
Yes.
So I guess I'm wondering whether churches that do that sustained, everything is awesome, or everything is awesome, be contrite, you worm, now I'm going to tell you why everything's awesome again. And then the ones who do that, do they expect that people aren't supposed to grow in their faith? Like, do they want to keep them in sort of stages 1 and 2, if you will? Like, is that an intentional thing?
I don't know if it's intentional to keep them in 1 and 2, but I'm not sure they're invested in them going deeper than that. I feel like in many evangelical churches, and please listeners, tell me if I'm wrong on this, but I feel like in many evangelical churches, the job of going deeper is left to these small groups, and it's left to like home Bible studies, and it's left to people doing life together, families meeting up on Wednesday for potluck and Bible study.
Right.
I feel like the work of spiritual growth is left to these groups. Now, sometimes those groups happen as Sunday school, but many times, especially in really big churches where they're trying to sort of help people find connection, what they'll do is they, create these home groups that meet in various neighborhoods all around the city, and you join one of those groups. And I feel like most of the work, because that's where people are going to be more honest about, well, this is going on for my meemaw, or this is going on for my spouse or my job or my kid, and people are going to share that stuff in those small groups. And maybe that's where some of the work happens in terms of trying, at least with the connection part. Now, that doesn't necessarily address the going deeper in your faith part.
Right.
I mean, it can, and it might.
Okay.
But I definitely think that's where churches are hanging their hat on. That's where people are going to get connected, and that's how we're going to keep people in.
That makes sense.
But I don't know that the senior pastor, at a mega church is concerned about whether his parishioners are in stage 3, or if they're just kind of in stage 1 and 2 and just kind of hanging out there. I'm not sure that that's a big deal. I mean, I don't mean to say that it's not a big deal, but I'm not sure that's where his attention is.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting the way you just phrased that people are drawn into or pushed into or led into small groups in order to keep them connected. That's a very different thing than wanting them to go through life with God, and to go through their pain with God, and to go through their doubt with God. And if you're going through all of that with God, there are going to be times where you just say, my God, why have you forgotten me?
Yes, right. And I think if we are moving through the seasons of the church calendar, we naturally move through those seasons. We move through those seasons where we acknowledge our sorrow, we acknowledge the dreams that haven't come true yet. We acknowledge, our own personal pain, and that's healthy and that's good. And then you kind of work your way through that with a deeper understanding of where you are and who God is. And then you come out of that better equipped to actually have joy and not just sort of this manufactured happy thing that happens.
Yeah, the other thing that's good about that is that if a group is doing those seasons correctly, and I do mean correctly, it means they're also teaching spiritual practices that you get into the habit of doing that you can then draw on as a part of your toolbox.
Right. Definitely. Yeah. Yes. You're teaching people how to pray, what prayer is.
That's right.
You're teaching people why we fast. You're teaching people why it's important to live the way Jesus lived. And that's all part of going deeper, and that's all part of teaching us how to live life and how to be equipped for that. And I'm not sure that most churches do a really great job of that these days.
I'm not sure most churches have done a very good job of that for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was pastoring, that was certainly something I was concerned about. It's not all about potlucks and worship or going out and serving people and giving them food. It's not about, I mean, there's more to it.
It's all part of it, but it's not.
I want you to get to the point where you are as much like Jesus as you can possibly be. And that means having a kind of peace that, isn't going to make you happy when things are crap,
right?
But will sustain you when things are crap.
Yes.
And without complacency, without everything's going to be okay. But the sense that deeply everything is okay because you are in touch with the one who loves you most of all.
Exactly. And listeners, don't misunderstand. There is nothing wrong with going to church and leaving church happy.
No.
We are in the business of hoping that people come to anything that we do and they leave lighter or they leave with something important.
More hopeful.
And more hopeful, exactly. Yeah. Hopeful. Hope and peace is a lot more what we're searching for than just like a happy over the moon sort of feeling. But we would love to hear from you, as we always do. What is your experience with this? Have you ever been in a season of your life when you're going to church and you know that you have to put on a happy face? When you don't feel like putting on a happy face, you're not wrong for not wanting to put on a happy face. And you're also not wrong for attending a church that, wants their congregation to be happy. I get that. But I think what we're trying to say is there is so much more to it than that.
Yes.
And so we would love to hear from you and what your experience has been with church and churches being, perennially happy.
Right. Right.
You can reach us at cocktailtheology.com all the time. We love suggestions for episodes and for cocktails. We have some more really great episodes coming. We have new ones coming out every Thursday. We just recorded an interview with Father James Martin. Elane had great questions for him, and they had a really great conversation. So we're going to be excited to share that with you in the coming weeks. We just have a lot of really cool things going on, and we want you to know about it. You can get on our mailing list at cocktailtheology.com, and we will bring you up to speed on everything that's going on. But in the meantime...
Don't worry.
Be
happy.
Bye.
Thanks
for listening. Bye.